Hello and welcome to Dyslexia Module 2. I'm Andrew Whitehouse and I'm going to be talking you through this today. You can get hold of me on most social media platforms. I think I'm on all the main ones. We'll put those up on the screen for you in a few moments in a bit more detail, just so you know you're in safe hands. I'm a TEDx speaker, From Disability to Superpowers. Worth taking a look at that if you're interested in dyslexia, because I do talk about dyslexia in there and the superpowers within dyslexia. You can find that on TED.com or on YouTube. Bamford lecturer, creating autism-friendly audiology clinics. I'm a short course provider. I forgot what I was then. Short course provider from Bishop Grosseteste University and the University of Lincoln. I'm a forensic special educational needs and disability consultant. Means I do court cases around SEND as an expert impartial witness. I deliver training, observations, and I've got a wide conference portfolio in keynote speaking. So, as promised, these are all the ways you can be in touch with me. I would say I would be delighted to hear from you. If you get in touch with me, you will never be a pest. I promise you that. I'm always pleased to hear from you. And throughout this workshop, there will be times in the workshop where I will suggest to you, your feedback on some of these things. And of course, we've got the directed task. Again, feedback on those will be greatly appreciated. So when I put this workshop together, or these 4 workshops together, there are 4 workshops in dyslexia plus a 5th mini workshop on early years foundation stage. I split the 4 workshops into number 1, the effects of dyslexia on learning and teaching. Number 2, dyslexia and the implications for teaching. Number 3, neuroplasticity and teaching the brain to track text. And number 4, self-assessment and monitoring comprehension. And that seemed to make sense. I knew that I was covering all those 4 things, including lots of other stuff as well. When I went to put it together, it didn't really work like that. So they all kind of feed into each other. So it's really more of a stream of consciousness workshop. And it's really, rather than 1, 2, 3, and 4, it is one big one broken into 4 pieces that cover these things. So what I would say to you, if you're watching session 2 and you haven't watched session 1, I would go back and watch session 1 first. I mean, it won't cause you too much problems, but I would say you'd probably be better to start at the beginning. That would be my advice. So we're continuing on from the previous workshop in some ways with a little bit of leftover from what is dyslexia. Where does dyslexia affect us? And these are some of the things that I didn't talk about last time. So you might have a problem with left and right orientation. People with dyslexia, very holistic, the way they see things, and holistic visualization, as I talked about before, as you will know, and therefore that has an effect on left and right orientation. Also, people with dyslexia struggle with time management. Not just time management as in being places on time, but also the amount of time things take and doing things in the right order. So again, something like a visual timetable for what you need to do in what order on a day would be a very useful thing for dyslexic people. Quite often they'll start a difficult task that takes a long time, and they'll labour over it when they maybe could have got 10 of their easy jobs done in that time. So awareness of time management is a very important one. Now, we've got the inaccurately titled triad of impairments there, which is an identification. Well, no, it's a theory in autism that that I still quite like to use. I often call it the 4 major areas of diversity. This is communication, social emotional understanding, sensory differences, and rigid thinking, as I call it, or lack of flexible thought. This is how autism is or can be defined. 4 things. So those 4 things in autism, they need to be present for a person to be autistic. Let's have a look at a different one here. If you watch the ADHD workshops, you'll have seen me talk about this 4 times. inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Those are the three things that need to be in place if you're going to be a person with ADHD. As a matter of fact, it doesn't actually need to be all three of them. It can be any two of them as long as they include impulsivity. So in theory and in practice, to be ADHD, you may only have two impairments, inattention and impulsivity, or hyperactivity and impulsivity. Could have all three, but it might only be two things. It's not much really compared to 4 in autism. If we have a look at dyspraxia, there are 3 things again: imaging, planning, execution. What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And actually doing it. And then, of course, that is a continual cycle with dyspraxia, because if you finish the execution stage, you're next up to planning, the next imaging stage, and the next planning, execution, etc. And the example I always use is kicking a ball. Once you've kicked the ball, you'll find yourself on one leg. You need to image, plan, and execute the next thing to get yourself off one leg. So that's dyspraxia. Let's have a little look at dyslexia. 4 things in autism, 2 or 3 in ADHD, 3 in dyspraxia, 7 in dyslexia. Reading, writing, auditory assimilation, that is in processing, memory, spelling, handwriting, vocabulary, all of these severely affected in most people with dyslexia. And this is the stuff that I want to be working on with you in this module. Okay. Also want to show you this. I dragged this out for a lot of my workshops. I think it's very, very useful. If we had 100 people with ADHD in the room, only 31 of them would have pure ADHD. The other 69 of them would have something else, a comorbid condition. 50% of people with ADHD are dyslexic. So actually I say dyslexic, they may be dyscalculic, but 50% will be either dyslexic or dyscalculic. So again, dyslexia is a common comorbid condition. It's a condition that has connections with other conditions. So how does it all work? I'll tell you. The non-dyslexic person, me, I am not dyslexic. I look at a page and I understand, I see it. Yeah. I am decoding, but I'm decoding naturally and easily. I look at the page, I know what it's all about. The person with dyslexia might well see a jumble to be decoded. It might be moving around. There might be words and letters and images the wrong way around. They might not be able to follow from line to line. The effects on the learner in dyslexia are quite severe. It causes you difficulties in reading. So in reading, you might have visual short-term memory. A problem with the visual short-term memory, if you're reading, means you can't remember the last thing you read when you're reading the next thing. Word recognition. Word recognition, knowing what that word is. You know, and actually, I'm going to show you a little chart towards the end of this where we show you how word recognition actually happens in non-dyslexic people. Speed of reading, how fast you're reading, comprehension, understanding what it's all about. Listen, if you're having problems with what happened last, the recognizing the words, reading slowly, your comprehension is going to be hit quite hard, really, isn't it? So your comprehension there is damaged because you're not holding in all the other elements, extracting the main points, misreading, and then of course if you're going to be doing that, the need to reread on several occasions, keep going back and back and back in order to reread stuff. Writing, difficulties in expression. Expression could mean using interesting words, using the right kind of emotional background for things, for your writing, sentence structure, getting your punctuation correct, planning, structuring essays. Planning, structuring essays can be a really difficult one. We have a system with ADHD for structuring essays. Pick 10 subjects and write about them a page each or something like that. That would be a possible good way of doing things with dyslexia. Sequencing and then transitioning between ideas. Most children's writing is one-dimensional. They will follow a story from beginning to end. If we wanted to have several plot lines, then, you know, transition between those plot lines might be quite difficult for people with dyslexia. Not only that, but because of the short-term memory, remembering what you did in the last plot line. I'm going to talk about this one for a minute. Auditory assimilation. Difficulties in auditory short-term memory. And we're going to talk about 3 mathematical things here. Remembering series, e.g. phone numbers, polysyllabic words, and remembering mathematical formulae. Right. So we used to call dyslexia word blindness, and we used to call dyscalculia number blindness. We now know that neither of those are true. In dyscalculia, it is a concept blindness, the inability to understand the symbols and their meaning and the words. So for being a word, being a symbol, being a presence, being a concept, and all that stuff. In dyslexia, we know that word blindness is not true either. In actual fact, words are the dyslexic's friend. And one of the strategies that I talk about a lot is labeling things and making words visible. It's actually your biggest problem with dyslexia is understanding phonics. So let's go back to the maths again. So if we have remembering phone numbers, remembering a phone number in order is much the same as remembering how to spell a word. And so if you have a difficulty with remembering phone numbers in order, it's more likely to be a problem with dyslexia than dyscalculia. The other thing that we need to point out is in dyscalculia, it is a concept and it isn't related to dyslexia. So, for example, I always struggled with algebra. I've told you this in the dyscalculia workshop, and I really didn't understand it. A person with dyscalculia might well have an issue and they say, right, 4 times 5 is 20. Brilliant, we've got that. 4 lots of 5 is 20. I've not worked it out. You've told me, I believe you. What about 5 times 4 is 20? 20 divided by 5 is 4. 20 divided by 4 is 5. These are just transposing the numbers and the symbols that connect them. But in actual fact, for a person with dyscalculia, that could be a real difficult concept to understand. Whereas a person with dyslexia, with a person with dyslexia could easily get that. They may or may not. It's not going to affect, it's not a natural part of what affects dyslexia. So there we go. And that was just a little bit of simple algebra for you out there. Memory. Memory can be less effective. Revision can be a longer process, and support for study skills is needed. Yeah, and we do get extra time for some people, particularly if they have a diagnosis of dyslexia. They may get extra time in an exam. One of the things we want to discuss there is if they've got an extra time in an exam, fantastic. I'm delighted to hear it. What are they going to do with that time? How are they going to fill that time? Are they going to just use that time to get more and more frustrated? Or have you given them, or have they given themselves resources, strategies, interventions that they can use to really maximize that time and really fly that exam? You know, dyslexia is reading, writing and spelling, but it doesn't necessarily have a knock-on effect to other subjects. So there is no reason why a person with dyslexia should fail an exam that's outside of their dyslexia. They will, it happens, I know this, but we should be able to put interventions in place to help them get through this. Spelling, and we're going to workshop some spelling activities, either in this module or the next. Each new word needs to be learned, and that of course may inhibit your writing. So this is, again, it's part of the decoding thing, that if you don't understand the phonics and the structure of words, then you can't use those strategies, the phonetic strategies, to write new words or read new words. It could lead to bad marking, and it could lead to your work being inadvertently discriminated against because of the way it looks. You may have reversal of letters and figures and things like that in there. You might not be applying the correct grammar rules, and therefore again, it makes an impact on how well your work reads, and you may not remember how a word sounds even after you've written it. And we do get a lot of people with dyslexia. They'll put a written piece together, and then once they've put it together, we'll say, could you read that out to the class? And they actually can't. They can't read it out to the class. Okay. Handwriting, letters may not be joined, printing may be found to be of help. I once foolishly put on Twitter, dyslexia, handwriting, cursive or printed, and honestly, you'd think I'd killed somebody. I had so many responses back to this, you know, how can you be so ridiculous? It's handwriting is best for dyslexic people. How could you be so ridiculous? It's cursive is the best for people with dyslexia. And I thought, oh my goodness me, what have I done here? It's only ever happened to me twice, having a backlash like that on Twitter, and both were very innocent questions. But letters may not be joined, printing may be found to be of help. And so I would say to you, we've got up to 10% of the population. Some people even say more. There are people that say it's up to 20% of the population are dyslexic. It's not I sit with 10. 10% of the population clearly cannot all relate to the same strategy. I don't think. It's that whole, you've met one person with dyslexia, that's what you've met, one person with dyslexia. So what I would say is, you as a teacher, as a professional, have your preferred method for starting, your starting point, and work with that. And if it doesn't work, have enough about you to say, okay, that didn't work, let's try something different. So in handwriting, I personally start with printed. It's entirely up to you where you start, and you might start with the school policy, but printed, so I know that A is in cat, and I can build cat around A, and cat is in scatter, so I'm word building. We're doing phonics here as well, but we're making more sense of them. So A in cat, in scatter, in scattered. That's how it works for me. But if I do find that it's causing me a problem, I step back and I say, okay, let's try cursive. A lot of dyslexic people find cursive good for working physical memory, to be able to work what a word feels like when they're writing it up. I'm reversing, obviously, for you. Vocabulary. Language acquisition will take longer as more examples of newer words or sentences structure required before they're learned. Now, one of the things I will say about language acquisition and vocabulary acquisition is that vocabulary acquisition is a lot slower in dyslexia for one really main reason. You are subjected to vocabulary through conversations with people, what you've seen in the media and heard in the media, and what you've read in text. And in actual fact, if you cut the text element, if you're not reading, you cut the text element out of there, then what you've created is a sort of a third where you're not accessing a third. So one of the things I would say is use technical vocabulary when you're speaking. Don't minimize it. Don't try and dumb it down, as they say. Stick with it and use those words, because actually you will be helping your learner with dyslexia, and you'll be allowing them to access more vocabulary, I suppose, is what I'm saying. Goodness me, we need to access. We need the whole school to access a single approach to dyslexia. We need to think about policies. We need to think about strategies. We need to think about communication across the school, and we need to be a united home front across the school for these children. So the ethos and the culture of the school, first of all and most foremost, has to recognise the learning differences that people with dyslexia have. So, you know, we have to recognise that we've got a whole load of kids in this school that need different provision. And I think one head teacher that I worked with in Norfolk one time said to me, I'm talking about these children. And what he means is those children that are not accessing the curriculum in the same way. He wanted different interventions for those children or these children. We need a commitment to awareness raising and training. I think the danger lies in the opposite, is when we feel we are aware and we maybe aren't, and that we don't need training because we've done this thing before. We always do things the same way. I think this doesn't help, and I think some of the schools that are more successful with the work that I do are the ones that maybe call me in every couple of years to do something, or every year get a regular rolling program of training. We need an ethos of nurture and success in helping kids to feel good about themselves and to achieve and to develop the competence of and capabilities of all learners, and how we sit kids together and how we get children working with each other, and any kind of peer mentoring schemes we may have. Promoting positive self-belief. It's very easy for a person with dyslexia to not feel good about themselves. I hear this all the time. People my age are talking about how they don't feel good about themselves, and you know, they'll drop it into conversation all the time. And then we have to, with dyslexia, really focus upon those areas where they excel and where they are doing better than maybe their peers who don't have dyslexia. Effective measures to bullying and harassment related to SEN. I think we're getting a lot better at that. I think our children are excellent when it comes to recognising differences these days. When I look back to the 60s and the 70s when I went to school, yes, I really am that old, but then you can tell by looking at me. When we look back at those times, you know, we weren't very good, you know, and even very mild forms of harassment, like innocent friendly, as it was considered then, name calling, and you know, which manifested itself as nicknames, were there. We don't get that anymore quite so much, but we do need to deal with it when it happens. And a stress-free environment, wouldn't we all love that? But that is the best ethos and culture that we can possibly have. Leave your troubles at the door. So, training, policies, sharing information. Those are three whole school issues that I think we really need to be looking at. So the training, training needs to be dyslexia awareness training, because we're talking about dyslexia at the moment. But quite honestly, if it was autism, ADHD, any of them, I think one of the ones we see less training is probably ADHD. Don't worry, I've given you 5 modules. But dyslexia awareness training, as we're talking about now, are very important. Just to be aware of that difference. Be aware of the stuff we talked about in Module 1, the difference in the dyslexic brain. Awareness of learning styles and preferences. Now, we've got, this is where we get into one of my little pet hates. We always think of learning styles as visual, auditory, kinesthetic. That is by no way near enough learning styles. You could keep on all day. I remember writing a list of learning styles for a series of workshops that I did in Scunthorpe, Hull and Grimsby, and I put this list together, and I only stopped when I ran out of page. So in addition to your visual, auditory, kinesthetic, you might have tactile learning, you might have research learning, you might have ICT learning, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Have a little go and see what you come up with. Sharing good practice. Again, in staff meetings, I want to see that there's an area of that staff meeting where staff can talk about things that have gone well, things that have gone not so well for their pupils in that week. And we, particularly with a focus on these children, the children that are on our radar as maybe having difficulties, and sharing things that have worked, and even more importantly, perhaps, sharing things that haven't worked. A commitment to training specialist staff to support colleagues. One of my favourite models was I first came across it in a school in Dorset, where the head teacher had appointed a Senko. Obviously, the Senko then appointed a series of experienced support staff to cover different areas of SEND. So they would have a member of support staff that maybe was specialist for dyslexia. That person would go out, get all the dyslexia training, come back and feed back to staff. Inclusion in school improvement plan. With the new Ofsted framework, I think we'd be very lucky to get away with not doing that. And then catch up for new staff. And again, a lot of the CPD that I come across, people get in touch with me and they say, we've got a lot of new staff, Andrew. We've had a little bit of staff turnover. Can you come up and can you do the workshop you did 2 years ago, which would probably be updated, but essentially the same thing. So you've got to ask yourself, have all the staff received training for dyslexia? Have all the staff had some kind of training support? Hopefully with these videos going around, if you're a group that's bought into these videos, then, making people aware that it's out there. What about all your support staff? So as well as your teachers, your support staff, they need to be aware of how to support. If a teacher's put a lesson in place, activities in place, they need to be aware of how to implement this. Is the Senko aware of their role regarding dyslexia? And that role can change from school to school, but depending on how you've structured your SEND and your areas of SEND in that school. But the most important thing is, how does the Senko fit into the whole scheme of that? And again, when we talk about the Senko, when we talk about specialists in that area going out and getting the training, one of the most effective things you can do, one of the things I like to see, is Senko and member of support staff on a course. So you get those two people having a dialogue. So if it's a course where we may be in Hull and we've got a room in Hull, a conference room, and people in, curly sandwiches, cold coffee, all that sort of stuff, and we've got from a school, we've got a Senko and the member of support staff that's responsible for dyslexia. That's fantastic. Then they can make a plan together. And of course, very importantly, are the governors dyslexia aware? It can be difficult for governors. They often come from a wide variety and background of different experiences, which is why we have governors. But of course, dyslexia might be as difficult as learning ancient Greek to them. So, depending on their experiences. Nice, attainable, accessible dyslexia training, so that the governors are put in an empowered position that they can help with dyslexia in the school. The policy should have clear guidelines on effective use of multisensory teaching strategies. When I talk about multisensory teaching strategies, I'm really sort of saying, if auditory is not working for that child, are we using our visual interventions and our auditory verbal interventions? We want appropriate assessment using effective monitoring and reviewing policies. A commitment to putting policies into practice from all staff. There are policies for everything. I'm a school governor myself. I'm a vice chair of governors in a school in Lincoln, and it is, there are millions. There's a policy for absolutely everything. But really, we do have to make ourselves aware of these policies, and we do have to integrate them. Perhaps in staff meetings, when something new comes out, would be a good time to do that, and particularly to ones with additional children with additional needs. Adequate resources and material match the pupils' needs. Differentiation. I am seeing pretty poor differentiation up and down the country at the moment. I can't lie to you. It's not in place as well as it should be. And obviously, that's something that I try to address in my training. And then finally on this slide, the appropriate use of ICT. I'm the biggest advocate of ICT. I don't necessarily understand it all. I've filmed something like 30 of these courses, and in front of me, you'd be astounded to see all the little lethal looking black boxes with cables hanging out of them and stuff like that. No idea what's happening. This is not an issue to me. It's not my world. I go to the BET Education Technology Show in London every January. It is the highlight of my year, or one of. I love it. A sad individual, aren't I? I go for the full 4 days. It's a free event. I recommend absolutely all of you go. All about education and technology. And people talk about it and they say, this is the technology of the future. Utter nonsense. This is the technology of the here and now. Otherwise it wouldn't be there. If it were the future, we'd be waiting for it to happen. And so this technology, education technology and IT really needs to be integrated well into schools. And it is getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. I do not accept the cost implications as much as I get given them. It's critical that school personnel, parents and outside professionals working with the child with dyslexia communicate. Again, this is rather like the staff meeting. We need to be talking to each other and saying, this works, this works, this works, and this doesn't. And sharing successes and also interests, special interests. So policies, good marking policy, good assessment policies, good homework policies, hugely important. We also, when it comes to marking, we need a consistent approach. Decide upon marking criteria before marking, a focus, content, spelling, method, presentation, choose one, maybe two at the most. So what I want to do is I want to share with you some marking guidelines that I wrote. And I wrote this on a laptop on a train to Birmingham in about half an hour one day. I was absolutely bowled over by, I had this idea of how marking should be more effective. When I was a teacher, and I'm going to talk about this, everything had to be marked every day, every single book that was used, block and bubble marking. You can imagine the hours and hours and hours that took. So I'm going to look at it from a more workable and also focused and tangible way. So there's a lot to go through here. If you've got your PDF, electronic PDF, you can click on the link. It'll take you straight through to it, and it's actually in my blog, and you can read it through, or we can work through it now in slightly less detail. And if you can't get hold of this, you can't find it, just get in touch with me and I will forward it to you. I will send you the link. And so the title of this article is Marking Guidelines and Suggestions for Making Marking More Effective. So I'm going to go through some little titles. Title number 1 is Praise and Target. Marking is about gaining a balance of setting and guiding future progress and building self-esteem based on children's achievement. A good marking policy should reflect this, but how? I'll show you. Children should be made aware of what they have done well. This is praise. Any achievements or successes they have made within that piece of work, we want to be looking for that. However, more importantly, to facilitate their future progress, they need to be given targets on where to go next with their learning. In some case, they need to be told sensitively that they are getting things wrong. So the whole point of marking is, one of the points of marking is to say, what have they got right here? How do we tell them about that? And how can we progress this in their future targets? And oh my goodness me, we're going to need to tackle this, because this is the wheels have fallen off this one. Like all things in marking, the exceptions are to praise and target. Sometimes, you know, you've got to pick your battles. And this is where the first error happens in marking. So you've got a child, they're really pleased with a piece of work they've done. It might not be helpful to set a target or point out errors. That may be counterproductive. Let them have that one. Yeah, let them have that one. Let it slide. Not every time, just on those occasions when they're just really pleased with what they've done, let it slide. Pointing out errors is just, or can be just, counterproductive. So in that instance, it may be better to praise only. Ignore any errors for development until the next time that child is working on a similar piece. In this instance, the target be set at the beginning of the piece rather than at the end of the last piece, based on the areas of development in the previous piece you've addressed, in a very positive way, such as, you remember that lovely piece of writing you did? Wasn't it great? And now you're 6 weeks older. I think you could do an even more amazing job if you did this, 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 and this. And so we're building that kind of metaphorical praise sandwich around this work. You know, you did this great piece of work. Let's do even better last time. Do you remember when you did the Lincoln 10K in 54 minutes? I bet you could do it in 52 this year. It's a really positive feeling. Only targeting. Sometimes children and adults don't do their best. Other times they do very little. You know, we all do this. In general, children like to know where they stand when it comes to expectations. I think we all do. And you could be sitting there and you could be marking a piece of work, and I remind myself back to when I was a teacher. I'm marking this piece of work and I'm looking at it and I've got to praise something and I've got to set a target for the future. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, there is nothing here to praise. Yeah? And if it feels like that, that's probably because there is nothing here to praise. It does happen. Now, finding something good about that and sharing that with the child, again, is probably counterproductive as well. If you're finding something good about that and you're telling them it's good, it might not be helping them, because you might be sending them the message, that's the level I expect of you. This is a good level, when it actually is nowhere near the level you expect of them. So be honest, set their targets, and then instead of scrabbling around trying to refer to something good in the piece in front of you, use the praise element to refer some previous submissions. So you're usually really good at extended writing. Perhaps we should have another look at the recount you wrote about the school trip last week. That was very well written. Personal, retrospective praise. Absolutely, crucially important. You're doing this, you're saying, this is not as good as normal, but you're saying it by referring to something from the past, something they've done retrospectively, and you're praising it. Really good way of doing things. Only target. Is the marking focused to the objective? What are you actually marking there? Everything? I don't think so. That doesn't seem to happen too often. Have a balanced of focused and unfocused marking. So it's often helpful, the child, if they're aware of what is being marked. For instance, if we're looking at apostrophes, that's great. And it can make it a lot easier for the teacher to be looking through that, just saying, yeah, we're marking for apostrophes and you got apostrophes right. If that child wants to have a conversation about it, or if you feel there's something, then maybe you can have that. And we need flexibility. Flexibility, by the way, I always refer to flexibility, is the magic F word in education. The magic F word being flexibility. Be flexible all the time in your marking. If you notice any glaring areas, particularly repeated, don't be afraid to break the rules and mention them, even if you are only looking for apostrophes. Even more importantly, if you notice a child is attempting something to extend their meaning, i.e. using colons in sentences or something like that, mention that too, because they know they've had a go at that. They want you to see it. I can actually remember 50 years ago, probably, my first attempts at handwriting, and my teacher coming back and saying, I saw that you did some handwriting in your, in that piece of work you handed in. Oh, you saw that? Great. I really wanted you to see it. So yeah, if you see it, mention it, especially if it's a landmark like that. Don't overmark. Right, let's do the maths here. So this is not a time in my life I would love to go back to. Absolutely. Are the teachers writing too much? Are the teachers up all night marking? Up all night marking? Wouldn't you be better up all night planning better lessons? Praise and target marking is hard work. If there are 3 pieces of work in a day, per child in a class of 30, that's 90 pieces of marking. At 2 minutes marking each, that's a very, very conservative estimate. That's 3 hours work. Consider how much written work marking that a teacher is doing in a day. Even 2 pieces would take 2 hours. And so you look at that and you go, how helpful is this to your dyslexic learners anyway, if you're over marking their work, when you might have specific tasks and specific targets for those particular children? Marking is a crucial part of the teacher's role, but only should be part of their role. Maybe we should only thoroughly mark 1 piece in a day. Furthermore, some marking should be done with a learner during the day, allowing them to address the targets immediately. Think dyslexia on this. This is generic stuff that I've put together, but think dyslexia on this. Short-term memory problems, get them while they're actually doing it. Get them while they're actually writing that stuff down, and get them while they're actually accessing that work. Have the children read it? You've gone to all that trouble to write some comments. Have they read it? Have you made time for the children to read it? Do they understand your feedback? Make time to analyse the marking with the children. Just because you've marked and annotated doesn't mean that someone's read it. There's millions and millions of books sitting in Amazon warehouses that nobody's read just because somebody's written them. In a busy curricular ethos, there may not be time to read it in class. Sometimes they may read the feedback but not understand it. And so we need to really work on this with these young people, and we really need to make time to go through that feedback with them. And so a good marking policy obviously is the essential part, one of the essential parts of the overall academic plan, but therefore time to reflect should be integrated into this and part of the timetable. This can be done sensitively as a whole class activity in small groups or in certain circumstances one-to-one. Just because we set a target doesn't mean it will be acted upon. Just because you've written down try using commas next time doesn't mean that person's going to use commas next time, or it doesn't necessarily mean they know what a comma is or where a comma goes. Under these circumstances, provision is made for the next steps, and the next steps are your targets but being enacted upon. And then very importantly, why not mark with the child, actually get them to mark it. Anyone worried about my caffeine intake, by the way, I should tell you that I'm a decaf user, have been for over a year now probably. So don't worry too much about my caffeine intake. What does the child think? Ask the child what they would do if they were the teacher. If I handed you this in, what would you say about it? Imagine that you are the teacher. What would you say about this piece of writing? What's good about it? What needs improving? You'll be astounded how insightful these children can be given the opportunity. And if they get the opportunity, they'll give you really, really honest feedback on the work that they've done. Are your learners being assessed on knowledge and understanding, or are they being assessed on putting it down on paper? In dyslexia, that's a big, big difference, that they can understand all sorts of things, but get them to write it down, there might be a problem. So therefore, are your assessments inclusive? Are you assessing in a way that those children are able to identify with that? I just want to say a few words about spelling tests as well. Spelling tests, as a profession, from a research and practice point of view, we have known for many, many years now that spelling tests are an ineffective way of assessing. Not only that they cause unnecessarily stress and anxiety to whole rafts of children. And there are so many better ways of getting children to find out how to spell certain words and things like that. And my particular memories as well, when it came to self-esteem, was when we had group spelling tests, and I was actually required to do this by the school that I worked in, where we'd be delivering a spelling test, and you would actually have your differentiated groups all going at the same time. So you might have 4 groups. I'm going to pretend there's 2. So spellings. Question number 1. Group red. Your spelling is elephant. And group blue. Your spelling is ant. And it didn't take these children to work out that they're the ones with the lower ability and they're being pointed out to all the other children. So spelling tests on every level is not a good idea. When we get to module 4, I'm going to show you an activity that I've put together, which is a better activity than spelling tests. Are you instilling disproportional time expectations for the children? You know, are you? It is difficult. You've got an hour lesson to do a maths lesson or an hour lesson to do an English lesson, and you've got so much work to get through for every child in there, and you've got, say, taken out all your teacher input, you've got 45 minutes in that lesson to get everyone to achieve the same thing. But really, is that how it works? And are you able to differentiate in that way? A child with dyslexia is going to struggle to put as much down on paper. Are there additional literacy expectations? Are they going to have to learn key words, etc.? All these different things. And are you putting on more literacy expectations than, I'm not talking about years ago, the literacy hours, I'm talking about the concept of literacy, by the way. You know, you're putting on too many literacy expectations. Information sharing. How is information shared with everybody about the staff, about the children's needs, the dyslexic children's needs? As we said, just to reiterate, we need to share all good practice in staff meetings, and again, your less good practice that you've become aware of. You want to make sure that the support staff are involved in these meetings, or they certainly get the feedback. And does everyone know what resources are available? So many times you find, you know, that somebody might suggest a resource. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to pull up a resource. People often talk about toe by toe. Toe by toe is a reading intervention strategy. That's quite a good one that a lot of people really like. And the question might be is, do you all know that Andrew Whitehouse has got one of those in that box next to him in his room? You know, so make sure people know what resources are out there, who's got them, and how you can get hold of them. Implications for teaching. You want differentiated resources. I'm going to get some differentiated resources out for you in a minute. Variety of learning styles. We want chances for discussion. So not everything's being written down. We want to engage those speaking and listening skills, particularly because a lot of children with dyslexia have got a limited vocabulary. Let's get them talking. We want to mix up the kind of activities that we're doing with them. So group work, teacher-led, independent work, paired work. Independent work might include research and online work, and a variety of visual, auditory and kinesthetic resources. So I wonder how many people out there suffer with stationery envy. So I'm going to get my pencil case out. This is my pencil case here. I have a lot of fun with this. What have you got? What has he got in his pockets, Hobbit? Okay, so what's in my pencil case here? So we're going to be looking at highlighters. Highlighters is there's got so much stuff in here. It's fantastic. Every teacher and every professional should have a pencil case like mine. I'm going to be looking at highlighters. When we get into session 3, module 3, I'm going to be talking about highlighters quite a lot. Highlighters here, there's a lot of differentiation here. This is your basic entry level highlighter. It was given to me by my dad, can you believe, years ago. It still works. Just, you can always trust your dad, it still works. This is quite a good one. This has got an easy grip. You might find if somebody has presentations of dyspraxia that an easy grip highlighter might be better for them. I always pick these up at conferences, always. I love these, just because of the novelty element of these. You know, people really like them. So I got this at Edge Hill University, that's in Birmingham. Can't remember what I went there for, but I still have the highlighter. I want to talk about post-it notes. So here within, in the inner sanctum, we want to talk about post-it notes. So I'm just going to get a couple of pages here, and we may well have been reading this book. This is a book called Dyslexia Explained. It's not a very good book. It fell apart. Can that be seen by the screen there? You don't have to be able to read the text. Yeah. So you've been reading, you've got your bookmark, and you put your bookmark in place. That's actually a ruler, but never mind. And you put your bookmark in place, and you come back to it, and your first question is, where was I on that page? Which page was I on even? You know, and lots of things there, because you've got your short-term memory problems. Also, the text itself's not a very good one, in as much as it's very, very. It's got a lot of white paper. You know, it's a bit overly white. So I'm just trying to find one here. Do you know it doesn't? Do you ever get a day? Ah, here we go. Here we go. Do you ever get a day like that, eh? So instead, you might put a post-it note on there, and that will remember exactly where you were. And here, and I just want to check, can the viewers see that little yellow tab at the top on the screen? So that is, you might have a yellow tab there that you put on there. It doesn't have to be yellow, obviously, to mark the page that you are on. You could even, with this one, this is quite good, that they've marked the page that they're on at the top, and a bit further down, the mark of the page. And of course, these are reusable and movable. And so this one here, that's a highlighter post-it, so you can read through it, so you can probably remember the last words you read before you went on to read some more. So some quite nice stuff in there. Just going to show you now the last highlighter of this little session, and then we're going to do some really funky highlighter work in 3 and 4. This one here, I'm just going to do something quite impressive here. Actually has the little highlighter tabs in the top of it, and I think I got that. That's made by Post-it, and I think I got that from Tesco, that great purveyor of dyslexia resources. And you can knock together a dyslexia toolkit really easy. I mean, when I'm in London and maybe got to travel on the tube and I don't want to be carrying my pencil case, you can nip into your local WH Smith and put a dyslexia toolkit together for about a tenner. I'm going to show you some of the things we use for lighting and colour as we go along through. Hole punches, any resource that helps putting things together or organising things. Dating stuff, colour coding. Again, this is so that we get that easy retrieval of information, numbering it, colour coding it, dating it, all those sorts of stuff. Instructions, clearly instructions, give you instructions clearly. This is very much in line with autism, but don't give too many instructions at once. I would just interject here and say the best way of giving instructions is visually, but you can't always do that. Don't give instructions while learners are reading or copying. Break large tasks into smaller chunks. Take in working stages to keep learners on task, so don't let them be cluttered. Put new vocabulary on a wall chart and direct learners to key points. If you're on a new subject, so you may be talking about biology, and you might be talking about plants, you might have all your key plant words up on the board in a list. I'm going to talk you how to use that list in module 3, but you put all the lit words alphabetically: chlorophyll, stem, all those different things, I'm not a biologist. I actually have got a biology A level, but it was a long time ago. And so, and then get them to highlight the keywords that they were using. Just to get some speech and language out there, dyslexia is associated with phonological difficulties originated within spoken language process. What are we looking for? We are looking for a few things here: word naming problems, word mispronunciation, jumbling words, syntax, getting the words in the wrong order, difficulty with rhyme and alliteration, using circumlocutions, which is working round the word. So instead of saying the remote control, we might say the black plastic box with buttons on it. Circumlocutions, paraphrasing, hesitant speech, where we're trying to recall those important pieces of vocabulary and needing lots of presentation of a word before being able to use it accurately and consistently. We're going to be covering that obviously in the next session. Stringing sentences, starting to tell a story, then a recount, then losing the way. This is in line with ADHD as well, that you start telling something and lose your track. Finding the right words, clapping, beating time to music, clapping out rhythm, that sort of thing. And here's a little thought or three. People with dyslexia, I'm going to close on these thoughts. People with dyslexia have difficulties with phonological processing. Okay. Dyslexia has a neurobiological, biological basis. However, the environment is hugely significant, and the following does not work in dyslexia. I promised you this at the beginning, and I think it's a lovely way to finish. I wonder if you wanted to read that to yourself. Let's just pause and you look at the screen and read that out. Okay, welcome back. The theory is that you only really read the first and last letter of the word, and that the order of the words in the middle don't really matter. And I should imagine plenty of you found that really easy to read. Your dyslexic learner will not, okay? And this is partly because one of the easiest ways for a dyslexic learner to read is by recognition of the entire word, flashcards. So remember that there is a very, very different way of reading with people with dyslexia. So, thank you for listening. Let's get on to the directed task. Hope you found some useful information in there. How can you adapt school policies to meet the needs of learners with dyslexia? I don't want a great long essay here, unless you really want to, unless you find your school is in desperate need of adapting policies. But how can you adapt school policies to meet the needs of learners with dyslexia? Just some ideas of things that you think, you know, what would help here? So I hope you get on well with that. You know how to get hold of me, sending in your answers, and I will respond to every one of you. And I do check my junk on a regular basis. Thank you very much for